Everyone roll initiative, because it's time to play some Dungeons and Dragons. Hey everyone, I'm the DM of Titans, and welcome to another episode of D&D Nerdiness. This video will be focusing on the basics of D&D and understanding the game itself. Sometimes new players will play a session or two, and it may not be exactly what they thought it was. The expectations may be different, and that's why I'm making this video, to help new players understand what Dungeons and Dragons is, and how you play it. So let's discuss what is Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game that is very focused on storytelling and acting. One member of the group plays the role of the Dungeon Master, or DM for short. They are the narrator and referee of the game. They create and narrate the story, or campaign, that the players will be playing in. DMs can either set their campaign in one of the pre-made settings that were created by the creators of Dungeons and Dragons themselves, or they can create their own world. Either way, they are the lead storyteller. The players, however, create their own characters to choose how to play the game. The DM sets the scene, and the players decide how the story will progress. The players also usually roleplay what their characters would do in any of the situations the campaign throws at them. Like I said before, the players decide what will happen in the campaign, however the outcome is usually determined by the roll of the dice. Now the dice, in their different forms, are rolled for many different reasons. Let's talk about that, shall we? First, we have the D4. The D4 is used for rolls of low variation. It's usually rolled to determine damage done by small weapons like daggers. That's one common use. Another use is for the use of healing potions to see how many hit points a player's character might regain after a tough battle. Next is a D6. Unlike the game-playing version of this type of die, this one has numbers on each side instead of dots. However, both are fine to use. This dice is usually rolled to determine the damage done by weapons of the martial variety. They are also used to determine the damage of spells. Next is the D8. The D8 is used to roll the damage of medium-sized weapons, like long swords and spears, for example. After the D8, we have the D10. The D10's most common use is known as a percentile die roll. This is because the D10 usually come as a pair. One D10 has single digits on it, and another D10 has double digits on each side. On a double digit die, if one of the sides has two zeros on it, that side is meant to represent the number 10 when rolled individually. The percentile die roll is usually rolled for certain spells that have a certain percentage to work, or other spells that rate percentage on a roll. Now we have the D12, and that is usually used by the Dungeon Master. The DM usually uses this type of die to randomly determine the hours and the months or other measurements the campaign requires. The time is usually rolled after the characters sleep for a long period of time, and the months are usually rolled at the start of the campaign. DMs also roll the months to see how long the characters break away from each other inside of the campaign. It's a fun role-playing opportunity that really doesn't happen often. And finally, we have the D20. But let's talk about this die in its own section of the video, because it's an important one. That's better. Now, let's talk about the D20. The D20 is probably the most important dice in the game. It's sort of like Dungeons and Dragons' bread and butter. The D20 is used for most of the game's capabilities. It's rolled to determine if an attack will hit a creature you're fighting, to see if you succeed on any skill you choose to try, or whether you can brush off the effects of a spell or certain condition. The d20 is very important because when you roll this type of die, there is a chance you could automatically fail or automatically succeed on that said roll. Let me explain. If you roll a 20, it is known as a natural 20, and a natural 20 is regarded as an automatic success. However, let me say this. A natural 20 sometimes isn't enough and isn't a success. Let's say that in order to attack a powerful monster, you have to roll a 23. You roll a natural 20 and celebrate, because that's an also success. But it isn't. Let's say that whatever you roll, you can add 2 to it, leading to a total of 22. That doesn't match the number required, and the attack misses. Just to clarify though, failing with a natural 20 is very rare, and really doesn't happen often. On the other hand, this one is a guarantee. If you roll a 1, it is known as a natural 1, and a natural 1 is regarded as an automatic failure. Unlike a natural 20, where it doesn't always count as a success, a natural 1 always counts as a failure, period. It always fails no matter what bonuses a character has to a roll. As an example, if you want to try and climb a rocky wall and roll a natural 1, the rocks would crumble in your hands and you would fall onto your back, possibly winding yourself. It could be rough to roll a natural 1, but it's fun for a DM to describe what will occur. Speaking of DMs, let's dig a little deeper into what a Dungeon Master does. So, like I said before, the Dungeon Master is the narrator and referee of the game. So, whatever they say goes. Their word is law. Most Dungeon Masters also bend the rules to a certain degree to allow the players to have some freedom in their attacks and role-playing capabilities. It's all meant to be fun. Dungeon Masters also tend to write up and plan a lot of their campaigns, sessions ahead, to make sure that everything does run smoothly. Don't get me wrong, a lot of Dungeon Masters, including myself, have to improvise quite a bit of their campaigns. However, if a DM plans what will transpire, then it helps them remember where they got up to and where the story will be going. The planning can be layered with every possible scenario, or they can be simple one-liners. It doesn't matter how much is written when it comes to planning a session or even an entire campaign. The players aren't going to find out, and if they do, a strange meteor might come crashing their way. Like I said, the DM's word is law. Now, with a campaign and the world it's set in, it might be a bit boring if the player's characters have no one to interact with apart from themselves. That's where NPCs come in. NPCs are non-playable characters that the Dungeon Master creates for the campaign to run smoothly. There can be an infinite amount of them, and the DM has to play every single one that the players communicate with. Each NPC can have a different voice and accent. They must also have different characteristics. Each one is a different person, and even if the DM isn't good at voices, they must be treated as such. Some can be far more important than others, like the story's main villain, for example, or a king of a vast city. A player only needs to worry about their own individual character. The DM needs to worry about everybody else. A DM doesn't just use NPCs to fill in their campaign. They also use a huge array of monsters at their disposal. Usually used for combat encounters, the DM can use certain monsters from over a couple thousand different options. Depending on whether the monsters you will face fit the theme of the campaign, or are completely random. These monsters can range from dragons to hulking ogres, living shadows, wasps the size of dogs, all the way to the gods of the D&D world themselves. Depending on how you encounter these monsters can also determine the type of monster. If you literally venture through the layers of hell, you could encounter many devils and demons. Or if you venture down a valley of underground caverns known as the Underdark, you could face a plethora of strange nocturnal creatures that could easily cause havoc if they were real. Each one has their uses, and they can be incredible to fight against, especially for the players, knowing that they will live to fight another day, if they survive the DM's wrath. Speaking of the players, let's also dig a little deeper into them and find out what they do while playing the game. So, the first thing a player should do before playing the game is to create the characters that will be in the game. To create a character, the main aspects are to choose the race and class. The race of the character helps determine the character's physical appearance and stat improvements. You could be a dwarf, elf, orc, half demon, or just your average human if you like. However, that's only a few of them. Then you choose your character class. This determines a huge part of the character's identity and nature of the character and how they're played. It can also affect the character's abilities and skills. A group of characters should be very diverse in their classes to make the group well-rounded. Both these aspects can help you create an amazing character that you are proud of and happy to play as. The next thing a player does is decide how the story progresses. Let me explain. Like I said before, the DM sets the scene and describes the story. However, the players are the ones who decide how it will progress. They decide what to do and how to do it. Let me give you an example real quick. A king asks your group to eliminate a thieves guild that usually meet up deep below in the sewers. The players could either decide to accept the king's offer and be in his good graces, or decline and look for work elsewhere. It could even be that the DM has set up the entire campaign based on a yes-no decision. If the players say no, then the DM has to find another way to work out how to keep the campaign on a similar path. The players have a lot of power when it comes to the destiny of the campaign, as they should. So to sum it all up before you go, D&D is a game that's about role-playing, storytelling, and a little bit of maths. It's fun and for everyone if you're into this sort of thing. For both DMs and players alike, it's mostly about friends hanging out and having some fun. Personally, I love every aspect of this game. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps you a little bit more in your Dungeons and Dragons adventure. So let's end things here and continue this next session. Take care.